everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, Kris Kurzman, sitting in for John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County.
Did I get it all done?
I did.
You got it. Yeah. Yeah. How are you doing, Kris?
I'm doing great. We're talking about we getting seed catalogs. So my wife is looking through seed catalogs, and she's got a really good mental map. Her mental garden is very detailed this year. She knows what she wants. She knows what she doesn't want to do, and she's ready to hit the ground running.
Yes, and that's getting easier now that some of the snow has disappeared. Mm-hmm. Boy, and when you start seeing some, more of the shrubs appearing and some of the perennials and some open ground, then you're really getting excited because spring is coming, and I can't wait to see greenery. Yeah. I just something green. And that's what's going to be fascinating about our topic today.
That's right. Yes.
It's all about greens.
That's a great throw. That's what we call that in the business here.
Did I do that okay, Kris?
You did a great job. Excellent done. Yes. Today our guest is Dylan Kallman. Dylan is the founder of Great Plains Greens right here in Fargo. Dylan, welcome.
Yes, thank you for having me, guys. Yeah, a little bit about us. And Don, you made a good comment. It's greens year-round in our farming operation, so would love to dive into that.
Well, that's what I'm fascinating about, because we just don't grow things outdoors year-round. So
Right.
I'm fascinating to hear about Great Plains Greens producing all year-round.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you maybe a little bit of a context and some background to begin. So Great Plains Greens started in the fall of 2022. It was me and two other partners, former NDSU alum, and we initially had applied for a grant from North Dakota APUC, and we received that grant. And when we received that grant, we said, "Oh crap, this isn't just an idea. It's we gotta go out and do this.
We gotta do some stuff now." Yeah.
So between that grant funding, we raised some debt and put in our own equity. We had the seed capital necessary to purchase our farm. What we do is container growing or modular growing. And so it's growing year round indoors inside a shipping container. So to give you a picture, right, like you imagine the freights on the back of semi trucks or cargo ships, that's what we grow in year round. And we use vertical hydroponics in it. And so going back to how we got started, it was that fall, it was the winter, it was snowing December 23rd, and our truck came from Boston with our container, our modular growing unit. And in the freezing cold, we put it up, we plugged in water, we plugged in electricity, we purchased our seeds and started
with your
growing.
seed capital. Sorry, I just had to jump in there.
That's great. I love it. So, and then started growing. None of us grew up around this type of farming. One of my partners is a farmer, but the other two of us, not traditional backgrounds in ag.
Yeah, that's what I was curious, kind of what your
new
background is.
Yeah, no, so my background, we all went to NDSU. I went to NDSU and studied agricultural economics for my undergrad, and then I got my postgrad in agribusiness and applied economics. My underlying focus in grad school was mostly ag tech, risk, futures trading, and
that's
finance.
Good background for business.
Yeah, no, it was really interesting. I studied with Dr. Bill Wilson there, and learned a lot. Gave me a good background, holistic background in agriculture, because I grew up actually in Minneapolis, not around farming at all, in a suburb in northern Minneapolis. So came to North Dakota my freshman year, learned about agriculture, really fell in love with it, found out how much of a powerhouse the upper Midwest is as far as growing crops and specifically North Dakota here. All the fascinating stuff that we have going on really captivated me. And so I continued to pursue agriculture in grad school, and then started this business. So
now I'm curious. Okay, in my head, I'm picturing a shipping container. The back end, the truck part of a semi.
Yep.
I'm picturing that arriving. And now, was it set up inside for growing, or do you build lights, and what does this look like inside?
Yeah. So we purchased it from a company that manufactures these growing modular units.
How did it get delivered?
The company
on the back of a truck, and they slide it off?
Yeah, a special truck, and then we had to work with a local company to get a crane out to the site to pick it up because it's all insulated with very heavy metal. So it's kind of pushing the limits on what semis can truck, but it meets that threshold. So yeah, we worked with a local crane company, got it off the truck. It was blizzarding out. It was like negative 10 degrees. So typical North Dakota winter,
I can kind of imagine what might be going through your mind at that point.
What are we thinking? Yeah.
Like December 23rd, really? We couldn't have done this earlier.
Yeah.
But there was all sorts of reasons for why that had to be the date. But and we got it in the inside. It's not, it doesn't come together. You have to assemble it. So all the panels, all the lights, they're just in boxes, and you unbox them and then you put it together. So it's, but it for the most part really comes prepared to grow.
So now, is the big shipping container, is it physically outdoors, or like do you move it in, or is it moved into like a warehouse?
Yeah, so it's all outdoors.
It's outdoors, sure.
Yep. So all outdoors. We have just a water faucet on the outside hooked to city water for when we need access to water. Inside the actual container, it's about 150 gallon tank, and that lasts us like a month. So only 150 gallons of water for a month. It's pretty remarkable. And I can get into the technology and the reasons why that's so remarkable.
Yeah, from the time that you got the shipping container, and then got things set up, when did you start actually growing greens inside that?
Yeah, so our typical crop cycle is 45 to 50 days. And I think once we got all the power and everything assembled inside, from seed to first harvest was like a little bit longer. It's probably like 60 days that first crop rotation. So beginning of March-ish was when we started actually growing greens. And then after that was figuring out who are we going to sell this to.
Tell us, what do you actually grow in it? What types of greens?
Yeah. So we grow, it's a really good question because, we do one type of what's called controlled environment agriculture, CEA, and indoor farming in general, right? There's greenhouse farming, there's container farming, there's warehouse farming, right? And there's a lot of tech and investments and automation, right? Like all trying to go into this to grow sustainable crops year round, right? And in our container growing unit, the crops that are most optimized for growing are really the leafy greens and the lettuces. So we have several different varieties of lettuce, and then as well as we have arugula and kale for leafy greens. And then we do some herbs. We do some basil. We do some chives. We do some sorrel. We also have grown things like Swiss chard. So kind of all over the place, butterhead lettuce, right? We know that the company we purchased this container from, Freight Farms is that company. That's the OEM. The growers, they're in actually all 50 states now because of us. They were like, we're in 49 out of the 50 states. And we're like, what one state are you not in? And they're like, North Dakota. And we're like, there you go. You're going to give us a discount? Or
it's interesting, Dylan, you mentioned arugula, and sometimes I've struggled how to pronounce that. Arugula?
Yeah.
Chris, have you ever tasted that?
Arugula? I eat arugula. I have no problem with arugula. The pronunciation of my
awesome.
wife. We're big arugula fans.
I love that because it has a flavor kind of all its own, and so that's a fascinating group of greens that you're growing.
Yeah, and I would argue fairly high value too. And I suppose that's kind of where you come at from a business standpoint, is that these are not only are there things that you can capitalize on the availability of them, but also like in the case of arugula, it's not always super cheap in the grocery store.
Yeah, no, the leafy greens market is interesting, and just the fresh produce market in general is interesting in the upper Midwest. We import 95% of our fresh produce from California, Arizona, and Mexico. So if you're, whether you're a school district, a restaurant, a grocer, right, trying to find fresh produce in the winter up here in North Dakota or in the Midwest, it's difficult, right? Because if you think about the life cycle of that crop, it was harvested 4 weeks before it ever got to your, front door or where you could purchase it. And it's been pushed with different preservatives and chemicals to keep it, from degrading. And so, our typical, we can plan pretty to the date when we're going to need to harvest and then deliver within 24 hours, usually sooner, but within 24 hours.
You know, the idea of fresh cut salad greens in winter locally, that, you know, it makes my mouth water for a salad. You know, isn't that awesome though? And not being trucked and shipped in from a distance is just fascinating. You know, and one thing going through my head is, okay, you know, these produced in a shipping cargo container like that. You know, sometimes you think growing food crops in the winter, you think of a greenhouse. But when you think of, in our North Country, trying to heat a greenhouse in wintertime, that has made producing greens cost prohibitive for many. And so I love the idea of producing these things in a controlled environment like that you can actually heat economically during the winter time. So no wonder these things are being grown in a well-insulated container, shipping container like that. And I imagine it's very, very well insulated.
Yes, very heavy metal, thick metal, insulating it, and you're absolutely right. Depending on what your type of crop you're trying to grow, certain different technologies are going to be more desirable. So if you're trying to grow, as an example, snack tomatoes, like those are really optimized in larger farming operations like greenhouses or indoor farms because they need a lot of space to grow. Leaf lettuce, lettuce, leafy greens, they don't need. You can kind of stack them up on a wall, and your typical head of lettuce isn't this crazy size versus you think about vine crops, right, that need to stretch 8, 10, 12, feet. It really depends on what type of crop you're trying to grow and what market you want to go after.
So Dylan, you started this 2 years ago? 2022.
2 years ago.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
What kind of market have you found for your product? And two, how difficult was it to locate buyers?
Yeah, that's been, when this started out with as an idea that, hey, we could be the first growers doing container farming, as far as we know, in North Dakota. We were like, who's going to buy this? Because that's a big unknown. It's like we had a pretty good idea on what we could grow, but we had not as good of idea on what is the demand. And so initially we started out just meeting with lots of people, meeting with our community, doing the farmers markets, learning what people like, what they don't like, what they can't get, what they want to get, right? We do, right now, to date, 3 different revenue streams. So we do farm to school, which has been a really cool thing where we work with 3 different school districts right now, providing fresh greens year round for those students. And that's been really exciting to see the buy-in there. And we're really excited to continue to offer that going forward. The second market that we do is farm to restaurants. We supply a few local restaurants here in town, usually the mom and pops, not the chains, just because they're more willing to work with an individual producer rather than a distributor. And then the third one is we do online retail sales through a local co-op called the Red River Harvest Co-op. And we sell online e-commerce there via just an online storefront presence as well as a subscription, similar to like a CSA, but subscription.
But can you imagine the selling point if a restaurant uses that as a selling point, that we have fresh salad greens?
Lots of restaurants do. I mean, if you get, especially if you get into like fine dining, that's a big selling point, is to say that you've got locally sourced.
And of course, schools. Greens. Schools are all about feeding children nutritionally. And so, greens that are this fresh. And so I was curious. So then when you were looking for markets, did you grow a batch of things and were you able to take some and say, well, look what we've got here? Or did you first need to find some of those markets?
Yeah, we at first it was, what can we grow? What grows good? And then is there a market for it? Because we didn't know. And then as we, the first really 2 years is a lot of R&D. It's a lot of, let's grow this. Let's go see if our local chefs or our local, subscribers are interested in this, right? And is it actually comparable to what, a lot of times we'd be able to work with like a restaurant and we'd see, what are you ordering from a Cisco or a Bix? And can we grow something similar and at a competitive price for that? And if you can't grow it at a competitive price, or, then we're like, well, that's not our market we're pursuing, right? So, a little bit of just R&D for the first 2 years, trial and error. And we eventually kind of landed on that crop rotation I started out with. So.
After we take a little break, I'd like to hear a little more about exactly how you grow some of these materials inside a shipping container.
And how they taste. That's what I'd like to know. Yeah, well, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
And we are back to Growing Together Gardening Podcast. I'm Kris, and I'm filling in for John Lamb today. With me, as always, Don Kinsler. And we're talking with Dylan Kallman, the founder of Great Plains Greens here in Fargo. Dylan, you were telling us about how you got started with Great Plains Greens and this facility. Facility, I guess it's a growing container, like a shipping container, that was delivered to you. Take us inside this thing. We've got on your materials here. We do have a picture here, and it's like a wall of green leaves, and it's sort of like it's got some hyper futuristic, but also like it looks like it's nice and warm and it smells great. What tell us more about this, about your growing operation?
Yeah, absolutely. And if listeners, you want to see those pictures that he's describing, they're on our website, greatplainsgreens.co. But the inside, the only way to really describe it is it's like walking into a spaceship. Like, honestly, I was blown away by the first time.
You kind of open the back end of this big truck body,
exactly.
the back end, okay.
Yep. So there's a door, we open it up, and then you're walking in and there's these crazy light show going on. There's fresh produce. So when you walk in, initially the farm to the left is the nursery station. So that's where we do all our planting of our crops, and they'll spend the first 2 to 3 weeks of their lives in that nursery station. And then they get transplanted into our growing or cultivation racks, and they'll spend another, depending on the crop, 4 to 6 weeks there. So, it's really quite an amazing experience. I remember the first time I was touring one of these container farming modules. I walked in, and similar experience. It was winter, and you just see this frozen box. It looks like any other shipping container.
What is the length of it? I'm kind of picturing like a semi truck, or sometimes there's smaller truck bodies back. I'm kind of trying to picture how long it is.
Yeah, so it's 40 feet long by 8 feet wide and 9.5 feet tall. So it's pretty big.
Yeah, nice size.
Yeah, it is. The company actually originally started out with like a 20-foot container, but then, as they did more developing, the company we purchased this equipment from, they decided to go with the longer one because you can be so much more productive with it, right?
Sure.
You have so much more feet.
So that's a pretty long
with.
semi-box.
Yeah.
I got to think too, then that's, if your demand increases or if you find new places to sell, or get another one. If you've got, you've got the space and you've got the hookups for it, it's a modular, like it's pretty easy to expand that setup. So do you need to have some clearance from like the city?
Yeah, we worked with the city to get approval because technically we're zoned as an agriculture. But we had to get approval for our growing unit because we're actually in an industrial zone. So you can't have agricultural equipment in an industrial zone. And we were trying to explain to them that, hey, actually, we're the most harmful, hazardous material in this whole area. You shouldn't be worried about us, we weren't making, because it's a container, it's not a permanent structure. So we're not actually altering anything to the land. So really, it's just like making sure they're okay with our definitions of, equipment. So we're not making permanent, infrastructure changes to the land. And we're in agriculture, and we just happen to be in the industrial zone.
I got to think waste and runoff. There can't be much in terms of waste and runoff, chemical residual or anything like that.
No, we don't use chemicals. And we know farmers that have these farms at in the cities, in parking lots in Chicago. And we know people who do this in residentially zoned areas. You just have to go work with your city and make sure they're comfortable with the idea. The farm itself looks good, right? So that also also helps. It's
Well,
not
I
like
suppose
an
from the
old.
outside, a person probably doesn't even know what's going on inside.
Absolutely, you're right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so when I've entered into this big shipping container and I'm standing there, now you mentioned that the greens are growing vertically, like on a wall.
Yep.
Picture that. Describe that for us.
Yeah, so we use vertical hydroponics. So we pump all the water to the top with tubes and just drip emitters. And then those drip emitters drip down on what's called a wickening strip. And then on those wickening strips, we grow all our seeds in the substrate is like a coconut core.
Sure.
So we put those substrates on the wickening strip in between two foam strips to kind of hold it in place. And then the drip emitter drips on the wickening strip and all the nutrients are mixed into the water. So that's how you get all your, nutrients to the plants is just through the water, hydroponics. So, I'll
So
grow
then the lights on these plants, I suppose the lights need to be vertically up and down.
Yep, absolutely.
Shining onto the kind of like a wall of plants, and then the lights are up and down vertically shining onto those plants.
Yep.
Am I picturing it?
Wall of lights to wall of plants to wall of
sure.
lights to wall of plants throughout the
Awesome.
container. So yeah.
Oh, so now, okay, you obviously need to walk in between. And so do you just have one row on one side, one row on another beside you?
Yeah,
Is that
exactly.
how
There's 4 rows.
And you're walking down like the middle between these?
Exactly, or on the outsides. So,
sure.
4 rows, 3 different sections, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome, and it's fun. And of course, I'm looking at a picture of this, so it'd be fun for listeners to go onto your website and see this pictured. At the far end, I can kind of see the end of that semi-cargo container, kind of like where it has the vent or something up above. I suppose that's maybe where heat comes out.
Yeah, HVAC. That's our HVAC unit. It's just attached on the back.
Yeah, and just a note for listeners, we'll include a link to your website, which is greatplainsgreens.co. And we'll include a link in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, you should be able to find a link and you can see photos and learn more about you guys there.
And I suppose also, okay, we think about heating in the wintertime, but I suppose in the summertime, I suppose a person needs it climate controlled also, because I suppose a shipping container could get pretty hot in the summertime on a 100-degree day.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So, and it's really actually there's a history to this question, right? So, we've had greenhouse technology for years, right? And that's been around. And warehouse farming to a degree has been around. But this type of modular growing in containers is relatively new still. And one of the key factors to that is actually the lighting power. So in the last 10 to 15 years, the intellectual property that has come out for these lights has been some of the most, remarkable breakthroughs in controlled environment agriculture because it actually enabled us to do this type of farming.
Yeah,
the lights weren't strong enough.
Plant lighting has really changed. The technology has really changed over the last decade.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when that type of intellectual property came out, and we did have lights strong enough, right? Plants react to the extremes, the blue and the red lights. And I'm not an agronomist, so that's my very, dumbed down understanding of it. But when you think of that UV spectrum, right, and getting there's no lighting coming into the container. It's a solid box, so you need all 100% lights to feed off artificial lighting. Yeah. And so that has been one of the more remarkable breakthroughs in control environment agriculture. And that's also why you don't see a lot of this farming because it's still relatively new. We think, just some this is my own opinion here, but what we'll see over the next 10 years, especially with all the investments that are coming into industry, is that our current business model is going to become suboptimal because the new technology is going to be so much better. We're going to be able to grow twice as many crops in the existing space that we have.
Just imagine that in a, pavement as far as the eye can see in parking lots, you can have these shipping containers growing fresh produce.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And good, back to that question then. So dealing with heat isn't necessarily as much of an issue as lighting? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, because the lights heat it up actually. So that's the point, right? Is that we actually have to cool the container down because those lights are so hot.
No kidding.
Yeah. So North Dakota does have somewhat, we talk about in North Dakota, different data centers, right? And Bitcoin Bitcoin mining facilities, and a bit of an arbitrage we have here in the upper Midwest is that it's cold for 9 months, so it doesn't cost as much from an energy output perspective to cool it down. And the same is true for this type of growing, right? We actually have to cool our container in the winter because the lights are so hot.
Oh, that's
they radiate so much heat. And so there's a bit of an arbitrage there maybe to say that this type of growing is optimized in North Dakota. So.
Yeah. Well, it's another way in which North Dakota leads the way in that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
Dylan, I'm curious. So you said you grew up a city kid, and really had no interest in agriculture or gardening. Did you have did anybody in your family have a garden? And if this was all new to you and you came to it from like a business standpoint, has it piqued your interest in growing in plants in general? Have you tried new things because of it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like a lot of my friends at school and back home were like a meat and potato, and that's the type of people we are. Hearty. We like our deep fried foods and our comfort foods here. And then I started growing, and our family had a garden growing up with strawberries, fresh strawberries. They're always better from the garden, right?
Oh my gosh.
So that was always great. But other than that, really had no experience or background in it. And then the reason what really convinced me on this technology is I'm touring this first facility, and they're like, okay, go ahead and like grab something off the wall. And I tried some sorrel, and I tried some arugula for the first time. And I was like, I can't believe lettuce tastes like this, or something green can taste. My mind was blown. I said, I can't believe, that lettuce isn't just this bland thing that goes on my burger. Like there's actual flavor here and freshness, right? And I was like, there is because you look at the stuff that you can buy from a distributor, and again, we're importing all those goods in the upper Midwest. It's been sitting on a shelf for 2 weeks. It almost looks gray by the time you eat it.
You indicate in the literature here that increased shelf life. Mm-hmm. And of course, that is disappointing. Like when my wife Mary will buy lettuce, and in a couple of days, it's gone. It's deteriorating already. And that's disappointing. So I can see, as fresh as this is, how it would have that increased shelf life. And you indicate that 0 chemicals you're using. And so this is good stuff.
Yeah, I think that really resonates too with, when we think about just sustainable farming in the future and what we're actually putting into our bodies, right? I think, one big and key initiative to that, I think the farm to school appeal has been that, you are getting such fresh, there's not all these preservatives and chemicals put on the products, right? And that's what we're feeding to our kids. And so,
and when kids taste this, the difference in these are actually tasty. Yeah. Then of course they'll want to eat salads and things that are good for them when they actually taste better.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's good for them.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. So, what are some unique aspects to this type of growing that, or maybe it's like unique challenges? Because there's a lot of I can see a lot of benefits to having a controlled environment and a very streamlined operation here. But are there not drawbacks, but challenges that you meet because of this that maybe you wouldn't see in like a standard growing operation?
Yeah. So as much as that, I talked a bit earlier about the benefit of growing, and it helps with some of the electricity in the winter from not having to artificially cool down the container. The winter still causes issues. So everything from last 2 years in a row, our HVAC unit broke, and that's never fun. And when that breaks, you can't control the environment in your container. You can't control
immediate concern in the winter, I'm sure. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. So
I bet you have alarms.
Yeah, we do.
I'm willing to bet there's an alarm out there.
We have a software. There's the hardware and the software side, right, of the business, and we have the software side sends us notifications when any of our sensors are reading out of error or something is out of the norm. So, but you can't just fix an HVAC unit in 24 hours usually. So, that leads to all sorts of issues with pumps breaking on the inside because you can't heat or cool it. That leads to plant disease outbreak because you can't control the humidity or the temperature, right? So there's just I think there's still and I'm bullish on the technology, we'll get there, right? Issues of when it's just so freaking cold out in North Dakota, things break. Things
kind
break
of reminds
in the winter.
me of our days in the greenhouse when my wife and I had our greenhouse business. Yes, similar challenges. If the power goes off in January, it's of concern.
Yeah, in general, you don't have to deal. We have 4 garden boxes, right? We don't have to worry too much about mechanical failure out there. But then obviously we have to deal with other things, right?
Right. We don't have bugs, right?
Bugs.
Right.
Yep.
So that's one thing is like we're all controlled environment, right? And there's no soil, so there's really no bugs. We don't have to spray our plants with any pesticides or herbicides, right? And then as well as, like I said, all the nutrients are just mixed into the water directly. So if you think about like, a traditional farmer with a sprayer, how much of that just goes to the waste into the soil and the plants never actually absorb it. Like we apply that water directly to the plant's roots. So it's being 100% utilized.
Do you and your partners do most of the work, or do you have any employees?
Yeah, so I'm the only partner in Fargo. So I guess I'm the farm manager / mascot. And then we have a few part-time employees as well that help out. Just some local kids from church and high school around here, and which has also been fun trying to get them to learn more about the food supply chain. And no, that stuff does not just show up on your table. It takes farmers to grow it. And so that's been really rewarding.
So obviously the greens have been very successful. Do you have plans or thoughts for maybe some additional crops, additional expansion? You mentioned strawberries. Any additional things that you're kind of looking at for the future? Yeah,
well, I mean, we're always, it's so early. We're still startup. We're still trying to figure out our identity a little bit. And, depending on what the demand is, right, I could see us going a lot of different ways. We might just purchase a container and retrofit it ourselves to grow raspberries.
There's plenty
or
of them
strawberries.
out there, right? Like shipping containers are...
Oh, and they're a lot cheaper than the one we bought. But, and so whether it's that and or, things like mushrooms, right? So we're always kind of like interested. We don't know, are we a container business? Are we just a container leafy green business, right? Is there more? Do we go into greenhouse? Do we go into, indoor warehouse farming? So to be determined, but I would say I am convinced of the thesis, which is we can grow fresh crops year round, and there is a, significant impact to our community, which is awesome.
You're proving that it works.
Yeah. Yep.
This has been a fantastic conversation, Dylan. Thank you so much for coming by. Once again, Great Plains Greens is your operation. You can find you at greatplainsgreens.co. Is that right?
Correct.
Right. All right. Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. This has been great discussion, and it has really made me hungry for some good, fresh-tasting greens.
Yeah, same here.
So thank you for that. And you've painted a great description. I can see your growing container, and I can picture it in my mind.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, so thank you very much for joining me.
Yeah.
And if anyone has any questions that wanted to direct to me on any gardening type topics, send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu. We always love to hear from listeners.
And photos. You love photos.
Love photos. Yeah, if you have any plant-type questions, send me some photos of various things.
And not just things that are wrong either. You like seeing people's successes and wins.
Stories. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and of course, we all like to know if something doesn't go quite right. We like to diagnose it. But we love to share our successes as well.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all for listening, and have a great week.